Hi, it's Robin Sharma, author of The Leader Who Had No Title and founder of the Titan Academy. And I'm really excited to share this video with you. This video will help you 2 to 3 times your productivity. This video will help you install the mindset of undefeatability. This video will help you experience exponential success over your next 90 days. So fasten your seatbelt. I know you're going to love the information I'm going to walk you through. Before I get to the mental model I want to share, in case you don't know me, let me just quickly tell you a little bit about who I am and a little bit about my work. I've been at this for about 18 years, and my mission, my obsession, what I feel is my calling is to help people become legendary performers. Over these past 18 years, I've worked with some of the most successful people in the world as their private coach. I've worked with numerous billionaires, NBA players, NHL superstars, professional footballers, rock stars follow my work, use my methodologies. I've had the blessing of working with many of the Fortune 500 over these past 18 years, ranging from General Electric to Oracle, Microsoft, Nike, FedEx, IBM, et cetera, et cetera. And I only share that to invite you to consider that what you are going to learn in this video does not come from a book I've read. It's not purely theoretical. It's distilled information that I have received watching, coaching, mentoring, working with many of the most high-performing human beings on planet Earth. So the information you're going to get is not only valuable and hopefully inspirational, but it's tremendously tactical. And with that, I'm going to get into the first point I want to share with you. And I call it the myth of genius. So you watch an Elon Musk, you watch a Jay-Z, you watch a Picasso, you watch a Mandela, you watch a Darwin, you watch a Kanye, you watch a world-class violinist, you watch an amazing chess champion, you watch a great athlete, and what happens? Society suggests that these people are cut from a different cloth. I call this the myth of genius. Society suggests that these people have this natural talent that you just don't have, that these people have gifts that they were born into. And that is such a lie, and I know that's a strong word, but it's a lie. It is a myth of genius. If you look at the science, some of the work, for example, of Anders Ericsson, the preeminent researcher in the field of exceptional performance, the reality is genius is less about genetics, and it's a lot more about a strategy and a series of tactics. And once you learn that strategy, and once you discover those tactics, then of course, apply them. I mean, this isn't magical thinking. You've got to do the work in order to get the results. But once you get the strategy, once you get the tactics, you start to practice them until they become your ways of being, you get the results that the very best get. So the brain tattoo, the mental one-liner I want you to start practicing until it becomes your new way of thinking is simply this. To get the results that only 5% get, you need to be willing to think, speak, behave, and do. Again, think, speak, behave, and do like only 5% of the population thinks, speaks, behaves, and does. And if you start doing this, the reality is you are going to leave the 95%, the card-carrying mass of the cult of mediocrity. And you're going to rise into the rare air of outright mastery. And that is not something for otherworldly people who are divinely blessed. Every single human being on planet Earth has the potential to be world-class in the area of their own personal inclinations. And that's the word scientists use, inclinations. We all have these things that we're naturally good at. And if we could only discover those few things, those things that people say, wow, did you ever notice how good you are at that? Or the inclinations are things that we just love doing. And when you start to get to know those things and you start to practice those things, over time you can reach a place with devotion, dedication, strategies, the right tactics, where people see you as pure genius. Okay, so with that context, allow me to share with you the mental model I mentioned at the beginning. And it's called the hierarchy of legendary performance. This is a framework I want you to really think about because it really maps out how the best think. It really maps out how legendary performers construct and architect the way they occur in the world. At the base, as you're going to see, is your narrative. What's your narrative? Well, your narrative is your personal story. Your narrative is the lens through which you see the world. I mean, you don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are. You don't see the world as it truly is in reality. You see the world through your internal reality of your own belief system. One of my favorite stories is about a father, and the father had a son. And one Sunday night, the father's reading his newspaper, and the little boy wants to have some fun and play with his dad. And the dad is reading the newspaper, being an adult, being busy. And the son says, "Dad, come on, let's have some fun." And he's really relentless and persistent. But the father wants to read the newspaper. Well, eventually the father gets an idea. He notices that there's a picture of the globe in that newspaper. And so he pulls it out, and he rips it up, and he tears it into many pieces, and he hands it to the little boy, and he says, "Here, son, go put this back together," thinking it's going to take his son quite a while to do it. But children come to us more highly evolved than adults to teach us the lessons we need to learn. And after only a minute, the little boy comes back, and the globe is perfectly back together. And the father can't believe it. He says, "Son, how did you do that?" And the little boy looks up at his dad, and he says, "Dad, on the other side of the globe, there was a picture of a person. And Dad, once I got the person together, the world was okay." And you might say, "Oh, Robin, that's really sweet. The tears are welling up in my eyes. Can we hold hands and now sing Kumbaya?" But I think there is a powerful metaphor in that story. And it's simply this: when you get your mindset to world class, your world will be okay. And it's such a seduction. We often operate as victims. We blame our background, we blame our family, or we blame our boss, or we blame our job, or we blame our hardships, or we blame the negative people around us on why our lives are not working and we are not playing at legendary performance. We blame the world for a lack of financial prosperity. We blame the people around us because we're not in epic health. We blame our parents because we are not playing in the rare air of outright world class. And the reality is we are our own worst enemy. We are our own greatest saboteur. But it takes a lot of courage and guts and bravery and personal responsibility to look in the mirror and say, it's my mindset that is causing me to behave like this at my job, or to resist doing great work, or to procrastinate, or to be an energy vampire, or to walk through my life complaining or gossiping or spreading negativity around the world. It takes a lot of courage to say it's because of my mindset. But the payoff for you is when you say, you know what? My mindset is my mindset, and it was developed from the day I was born based on the messaging of my parents, based on the messaging of my teachers in school, based on the messaging I picked up from my peers and my friends. That really is what your story is based on, that lens through which you see the world. It's just the beliefs that you learned from the people around you. And unfortunately, a lot of us had parents or had associations or teachers, and it's even from the media and society around, and it happens invisibly, but the messaging that forms our personal narrative and our personal story and our personal stained glass window through which we see the world is generally one of scarcity and mediocrity, and it hypnotizes us to resign ourselves to thinking average and doing average work and living average lives. And again, it gets back to, why would you want to think like you're a genius? Because geniuses are different, and they've got different talents, and they're gifted, and they're divinely blessed. And that is just pure, outright nonsense. You know what positive psychologists teach us? Your story about your potential determines whether you live your potential. Why? Well, because if your story is, Jordan and Buffett and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Shakespeare and Copernicus and Mother Teresa, well, those people were born into their brilliance. Who am I to dream that big? Who am I to think I could live a world-class life? Who am I to think I could be the Rembrandt of my industry? Well, if that is your story, then your story is going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if your story is you can't play at world class, you're not going to read the books, you're not going to go to the courses, you're not going to put in the practice hours that research says is 3.44 hours a day for 10 years before the first signs of genius present themselves. You're not going to surround yourself with other people who are committed to world class at your skill. It's called a talent hub. You're not going to basically, like I mentioned earlier, you're not going to run the strategy, you're not going to run the tactics, and you're not going to install the rituals required for you to get to world class because your story and your narrative says you can't be at world class. So your brain says, well, what's the point? Why not spend the rest of my life watching television in a subdivision? And that is such a crime against humanity. And I'm not saying that lightly. I think that is one of the greatest crimes against humanity. And I'm on a mission, and it has become my obsession to spend the rest of my life traveling the world, recording training videos like this, and evangelizing a message, which is we are born into genius. We are all capable of legendary performance. You deserve a life well beyond your wildest dreams. And in these training videos, I'm going to show you exactly what to do. But on this first point, as you can see at the base of the hierarchy of legendary performance, it is your narrative. And I really want you to remember that the more you can start thinking about your narrative, the more you're going to be aware of your narrative. I'm going to repeat that again because it's so important. Your transformation lives in your awareness. And the more you start to go, this is an interesting idea Robin's challenging me with, hopefully with great respect and love. But as you start to think about your narrative, as you start thinking about your story, as you start thinking about the lens through which you see the world, as you start thinking about your beliefs, because here's another key idea, key brain tattoo, your behavior reflects your beliefs. Your daily behavior reflects your deepest beliefs. So as you start thinking about your narrative, you start to become more aware. And you start to say, I have a narrative or a story that really does say I'm average. It really does say the world is a scarce place. It really does say, I better not be brave because I could fail. And there's too much pain in the discomfort of leaving the safe harbor of the unknown. But as you start to think about your story and your narrative, you then become at choice. And when you are at choice, you start to say, I'm going to start rewiring through practice and rehearsing and thinking new thinking. And you start to install a new narrative. And as you have that new narrative or that new story about who you are, what you can do, what you can build, your place under the sun, your vision for the rest of your life, everything begins to change. Why? Because your behavior reflects those deep beliefs. Your behavior automatically starts to change. As you'll see from the mental model I'm walking you through, which I call the hierarchy of legendary performance, element number 2 are rituals. World-class tennis players, I'm talking about BIW, best in the world tennis players were observed. And here's what they found. What made the best tennis players in the world the best was not really what they did on the court. It was what they did in between points. It was their recovery rituals that made them great. If you look at many of the best athletes in other sports, what made them world-class was not their natural talent. It was not even their willpower. It was that they had the ability to install a series of rituals which, when they ran them, allowed for legendary performance. Now here's a really, really, really key point. I hope you're excited to learn it because it really is a game changer. University College of London has discovered that it takes 66 days of daily practice on a specific habit or a specific skill or a specific ritual to reach a point that they call automaticity. And the automaticity point simply means that you reach a level where it's easier to do the new ritual than not to do the new ritual. And I'll repeat that again because it's so important. 66 days of practicing the new ritual or habit that you want to install until you get to a point where it's actually easier to do the new thing than not to do the new thing. And that's called automaticity. Share that with your friends later today. But the point is really this. Your brain is the result of 6 million years of evolution. Your brain is sort of a mental miracle. And most of us don't know how to use our brains. But your brain has a phenomenon or a gift called neuroplasticity. And so your brain is actually designed to grow and to shift and to evolve and to build new skills. So please don't say, Robin, I've tried new things and it didn't work. Maybe you didn't do the work until the new ritual became automatic. Element number 3 in the hierarchy of legendary performance, obsession. Picasso. One day Picasso was in a marketplace and a woman sees Picasso and she runs over and she says, Mr. Picasso, I am your #1 fan. And he says, thank you. And she pulls out a piece of paper and a pencil and she says, Mr. Picasso, could you do a little drawing for me? And he says, sure. He does a little drawing for her and he hands it to her. And the woman looks at it and says, Mr. Picasso, you are amazing. You are so gifted. You are a genius. And she starts to walk away. And he sort of yells a little at her and he says, excuse me, madam. And she turns around and says, yes, Mr. Picasso. And he says, that'll be $1 million. And she looks at him and she goes, Mr. Picasso, $1 million. It took you 30 seconds to do that. And he looks at her and he says, my dear lady, it took me 30 years of daily focus, practice, commitment to mastery to be able to do that in 30 seconds. My point about obsession is simply this. We look at the Picassos of our industries. We look at people who are super fit. We look at people who have financial freedom. We look at people who have gorgeous family lives. And we think that these people are somehow different from us, that they were lucky. Lucky is less about getting lucky, and it's a lot more about doing the right things. And one of the things I want you to think about is that every great performer, every legendary producer was obsessed. They were obsessed with their one thing. They were obsessed with their vision. They were obsessed with the idea that they could find the theory of relativity. They were obsessed with the idea that they could be best in the world at their one skill of focus. And you might say, Robin, this word obsession, isn't an obsession unhealthy? And I would invite you to play with the idea that an obsession is only an unhealthy thing if it's an unhealthy obsession. And the reality is, for you to get to your grandest vision, for you to play at the highest version of your best self, you need to be obsessed about your one-page plan. You need to be obsessed about your vision for your future. You need to be obsessed around your goals. You need to be monomaniacally devoted to where you want to be over the next 90 days, 180 days, 365 days, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. Why? Because clarity is mastery. A vague vision will lead to vague results. You talk to most people in the 95%, I'm not judging, I'm just reporting, and you ask them, where do you want to be 90 days from now? I don't know. You say, show me your one-page plan of your future. What you want your career to look like, what you want your family to look like, what you want your health to look like, what you want your financial life to look like, what you want your lifestyle to look like. I don't know. You ask most people, what is the one line you want people saying about you on the last hour of your last day? And they say, I don't know. Why? Because most people are busy being busy. Victims are busy, leaders are focused. Victims make excuses, leaders deliver results. Victims are frightened by change, legendary performers are inspired by change. Victims love leisure. Gossiping, chit-chatting, too much social media, medicating themselves with too much television. Legendary performers love learning, and they love rolling up their sleeves and getting their obsession done. You know what makes mastery? It's not natural talent, as I've been suggesting to you. It's hard work, it's sacrifice, it's passion, it's training, it's grit, it's devotion. I watched a documentary a little while ago about Ray Boom Boom Mancini, one of the great boxers of all time. And it was fascinating to me. He said, my brother was more naturally talented than I was. He was taller, he had a longer reach, but I had more heart. And you hear boxers talking about that a lot. In the gym, he had heart, she had heart. She got knocked down, but she got back up. She might not have been the most talented, but she outworked or he outworked everyone around them. Here's what the science says. To be world-class, you need to put in 3.44 hours a day of training on your skill for the equivalent of 10 years before you reach world class. You see, you have legendary performance in you. You have greatness in you. You have otherworldly performance in you. But are you willing to do what's required to birth legendary performance in the world? I mean, we all want to be iconic, but most of us are not willing to put in the training and the practice, go to the courses, invest in the learning, surround ourselves with the right people, get the right coaching, and then run the right strategy and tactics to get the result that we want. Why? If we wanted to go deeper? Because of that narrative again, that story. We don't really believe we can play at 1%. We don't really believe we can leave average. We don't really believe that we can be geniuses in the skills of our choices. So just remember the importance of obsession. You've got to be obsessed with where you want to be. You want to be obsessed with where you want to be in your industry, obsessed with your financial goals, obsessed with your physical goals, obsessed with your vision for your greatest life. Okay, we're moving up the hierarchy of legendary performance. I want to congratulate you for your attention and for you rolling up your sleeves and being so open to this learning. And I hope you're taking lots of notes, and I hope you are focused on the mental model that you see in front of you. And element number 4 is one of my favorite things to teach, which is the power of environments. I want you to think about this. Places, stimuli, people. PSP, places, stimuli, people. Those things really form your environments, and your environments really forge your performance. I'll put it to you this way. Legendary performance is the child of your environments. Now you're going to go, Robin, what are you talking about here? Well, your performance is really a result of the environments you fill your life with. And so when I say places, stimuli, people, these are the environments that most people fill their life with. Places. Well, that really just means, are the places that you inhabit at work, at home, in your free time, are they positive? Do they inspire you? You know, do you hang out in that coffee shop when you're doing your creative work with the right light and the right music and the right energy? I mean, if you look at really creative people and the best performers and the top producers, they understand that your places really do affect your mindset. You know, they spend a lot of time in nature. You know, you have people like the great authors, and they have this writing studio that looks over the ocean, and they watch the sun come up, and there's flowers outside, and they watch the birds go by, and they get that the places you fill your life with affect your mindset and affect your energy. The second thing, stimuli. That's another element of the environment. I mean, do you wake up in the morning with the news on in the background? Do you drive to work with talk radio? You know, often making fun of people, celebrating the worst of humanity versus the best? I mean, what are the stimuli that are going on in the background of your days? Epic performers are super careful about the stimuli. I mean, is your cell phone always going off? Do you have your notifications on all day long? You know, these things matter. According to the latest science, I'm dropping a lot of science on you, but this is what science and research says. On an average day, we spend 2.1 hours in distraction. You know, all that stimuli depletes your focus. It depletes your energy. It depletes your willpower. And then the third part of environments, what? People. The people you surround yourself with either destroy your life and drain your game, or they build your life and they contribute to your game, and they contribute to your mindset, and they contribute to your performance. And again, let's go to the science. Emotional contagion. Emotional contagion is simply a phenomenon that's been studied that says this. You pick up subconsciously on the emotions of the people you spend most of your time with. Couples were studied. If the wife was depressed, over time, invisibly, incrementally, and automatically, the husband would become depressed, and vice versa. And so what I'm suggesting to you, and I'm challenging you to really go deep on this because it's so powerful. If you spend time with people in fear over time, your dominant emotional default will be fear. If you spend time with people who think about scarcity, there's never enough money, there's never enough opportunity, the world is such a contracted place, you will start feeling like that. If you start spending time with people who are angry, you will start picking up on that anger, right? The good news is, through the phenomenon of emotional contagion, if you start spending time with people who are positive, who radiate passion, who believe in themselves, who come from a spirit of generosity and open-heartedness and the conviction to be courageous, brave, and world-class, their emotions will be contagious. And related to that is also the idea of attitudinal contagion. You pick up on the attitudes and the narratives and stories of the people you are around. And that's why, if you are the smartest person on your street, maybe today is the time to move to a new street. If you are the most creative person in your neighborhood, maybe this week is the time to start looking for a new neighborhood. If you are the most excellent person in your circle, maybe this month is the time to have the bravery to find a new circle, because you rise or fall based on your associations. And that's one of the key elements of environments. Element number 5, production. Production is all about your output. Legendary performers are obsessed with their body of work. Here's an idea I want you to consider. I'm going to challenge you to consider. The average performer doesn't really care that much about what they put out in the world. But at the end of your career and on the last day of your life, your reputation and your good name will in many ways be determined by your body of work. Every single output, every single bit of work comes together to form your production, your body of work. So if you really want to play in the rare air of the top 5% of your industry and people walking the planet, really think about your production. And really think about this concept, a monopoly born of outright mastery. I mean, would you like to have a monopoly on what you do? Would you like to be the only person in the world who does what you do? That is really your opportunity. You see, most people, they resign themselves to good enough. They say, you know what, my work is good enough. I'm not quite average. I'm a little bit better than average. That's good enough for me. But to me, good enough is not very good. And this is the opportunity. You see, to leave average and to say, my work is not just my job. My work is my craft. I'll give you an example. A little while ago, I was in Johannesburg, and I was at the airport, and I walked into the men's room, the restroom, the washroom, and here's what I heard as I walked in. Welcome to my office. And I was stunned. And there was a man, he was the janitor at this restroom or men's room or WC at the Joburg airport, who saw his job not just as his job, but as his calling. And he said, you know, welcome to my office. And the restroom was perfect. It was so clean. It was so impeccable. And he radiated pride. And I started to interview him after we talked for a few minutes. And he said, you know, I see myself as an ambassador to South Africa. He says, when people come into here, this is my office. And it's got to be impeccable. And I've got to be on my game. And I'm very proud of what I do. And I want to do this for the rest of my life. And so you want to be so good at what you do that when people watch what you do, whether it's cleaning a bathroom, whether it's sweeping a street, whether it's running a team, whether it's running a business, whether it's being an astronaut or a firefighter or a poet, or whatever you do in the world, see it not as a job, but as a craft. You know, the great Hollywood comedian Steve Martin was asked, how could I be the next Steve Martin? And he said, be so good at what you do that we cannot ignore you. And that is the opportunity, to be so good at what you do that you are the only person in the world who can do what you do. Because the marketplace always rewards the best. You see, if you're average, there's not a lot of opportunity. You're not really in demand. You're not really indispensable to your organization. But if you are so good at what you do that your organization or your marketplace cannot function without you, then people will blaze a path to your door. So that is the great differentiator. See your work as your craft. And how do you get there? Through learning. You know, education is inoculation against disruption. And the person who knows the most wins. Why? Because as you know more, you can achieve more. And that's why you want to invest in your learning. You want to invest in online courses. That's what all the best do. You want to go to a conference at least every 90 days. You want to hire a coach because that will accelerate your learning and your performance. You see, the ordinary person says, well, that costs a lot of money. The legendary performer says, well, I'm not going to worry about the cost. I'm going to consider the return on investment and the value that I get from that investment in my learning. And the final idea I want you to think about on point number 5 is the idea of your personal economy. We think about a global economy, we think about a domestic economy. What about your personal economy? And that's really what that monopoly is all about. When you rise to mastery, people only want to do business with you. You know, there really is a lot of competition at mediocrity. There's very little competition. You basically have your own economy when you're playing at mastery. Well, we're at the top of the hierarchy of legendary performance, which brings me to impact. When I was growing up, my father, a great source of wisdom in my life, often shared an idea with me. And it was simply a quote from Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet. And my dad used to say, Robin, when you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice. And really, that's the ultimate endpoint of legendary performance. It's less about applause. It's less about being liked, because you can change the world or you can be liked, but you can't do both. It's less about standing ovations. For the real A player and legendary performer, it's all about impact. It's all about creating rich streams of value for as many people as possible. Impact. It's all, impact is really contribution. You want to be so good at what you do. You want to be so great in terms of your production. You want to be so courageous and brave in terms of your mindset that when you go out in the world every day, you do amazing things. You make lives better. You make your customers' dreams come true. You are an inspirational force in the world. Because ultimately, to lead is to be of use. And no one knows how much time we all have left. Most of us, we play the great game of postponing our greatness. We say, I'll do the work Robin's talking about, I'll invest in the courses, I'll rise to the rare air of world class, I'll get my narrative right, I'll get my rituals right when things are a little less busy. But right now I've got a lot on my plate. And yet no one knows what our last hour of our last day is. And so my challenge to you is to really think about your impact. Really think about how the generations who will follow you will know you have been here. And really think about what you want your life to stand for. What will be your contribution because you have been here? I'll leave you with a final story. When I was researching the monk who sold his Ferrari, I came across this interesting example of an Indian Maharaja. And every morning, this man would celebrate his own funeral, complete with music and flowers, and all the while he'd be chanting, I have lived fully, I have lived fully, I have lived fully. Now, this seemed like a bizarre thing to do first thing every morning. So again, I asked my dad, I said, Dad, what's this all about? And my dad said, Robin, that's easy. This Maharaja has developed a morning ritual, a tradition, to connect him every day to his own mortality. This man has developed a habit to remind him that every single day could be his last. And I personally think reminding yourself every single day on the shortness of life is not depressing. It's not negative. I think it's inspiring. Because when you realize that not one of us knows how long we have left to live, then you strip away all the accessories. You don't really care if people like you or think you're great. You don't really chase these shiny toys that so many people are spending the best hours of their best days chasing. You start to live to the point. You start to do your dreams. You start to act with power, authenticity, and courage. And when you do that, you are all about impact. And when you do that, you do become someone that people admire. And when you do that, you do rise to your best life. And when you do that, you do become a legendary performer, which ultimately is my greatest wish for you.